We have former Conservation Minister and former Green MP, Eugenie Sage. Eugenie, kia ora. Good to have you here.
Kia ora koutou. Thanks for having me.
Now, this is pretty big news, a huge change. So Simon's happy. Are you?
No, and I think Mr Cameron has perpetuated the myth that stewardship land is low value. Jan Wright, as Parliamentary Commissioner, made it very clear that there was a lot of stewardship land that had very high value. And that's what the expert panel that Mr Potaka has overridden a lot of their recommendations. There are very few additions to national parks. There are a couple of areas, Bullock Creek, Cave Creek, that are going to be added to Paparoa National Park. There are a number of recommendations to add areas to Kahurangi. None of those are proceeding that I can see. But worst of all is the large area that's been left as stewardship land, including Denniston, Te Kuha, Waitaha, that will mean these fast-track destructive coal mining proposals and the hydro scheme that's proposed for the Waitaha makes it much easier for those to go ahead. Mr Cameron also, I think, is probably happy because there's over 3,000 hectares that's proposed for disposal, and quite a lot of that is river flats, which have got a lot of regeneration potential, and grazing is something obviously that farmers want to do. But one final point there is that on the Taipotini west coast, it's one of the few parts of Aotearoa where you've got Kiuta Kitai, mountains to the sea, sort of vegetation communities, habitats from the subalpine shrublands, coastal wetlands right out to the coast. And so disposing, privatising riverbeds is interrupting that.
Okay. All right. So not happy at all with this decision. Clare Amos.
I think when I read this, I'm concerned that, when you lose land that isn't marked for conservation, you lose that forever. But I think what most disturbed me about this was Potaka going it alone on the decision making. And we've seen parallels of this in the education space with our education minister. There seems to be the shift of ignoring expertise and ignoring treaty partners and making unilateral decisions that appear to be a bit self-serving in terms of what they can then do with the land. So I'm concerned about all of the things that Eugenie just outlined, but I'm also really concerned that this is yet another example of one of our ministers taking it upon themselves to make unilateral decisions and stop listening and working with their partners. And My understanding is Ngāi Tahu had a treaty settlement where there was an expectation that they were always going to be partners in these decision makers.
Okay, stay there, Eugenie. We've got someone who does represent mining interests here, Patrick.
Yeah, I think this decision has been overhyped in terms of the significance of the achievement. The last government under Kitty Allen was talking it up. It's effectively a clerical decision. The classification of land, unless it's added to national park, which prohibits any form of economic development, doesn't change anything. It doesn't make any difference for native species trying to go forth and multiply. It doesn't make any difference for unwanted pest or predators flourishing throughout the conservation estate. And largely, the economic activities that could occur on stewardship land can occur in most parts of the conservation estate outside of national parks.
Eugenie?
National park status is the highest protected status, and it does protect the land property. In terms of Clare's point, with Ngāi Tahu, there's the Tarahanga e Toru Historic Reserve, which is adjacent to Arthur's Pass National Park and goes north, is one of the biggest areas that's proposed. But what's happening here is that it's trying to shoehorn Ngāi Tahu's aspirations for their values to be recognised into historic reserve status. We're never designed for that. And I guess that highlights that our conservation legislation, national parks, reserves that all need an overhaul, but what the government's proposing in terms of its discussion documents is to make it much easier to sell off up to 60% of our public conservation lands and to make it much easier for destructive development. So Ngāi Tahu has come out of it with the Tarahanga e Toru Historic Reserve. It'll be managed and held by the Crown, but more recognition of their values. But it's a lost opportunity to add to our national parks, and by keeping stewardship land status, it's freeing it up for those big
someone says
coal mines.
A lot of stewardship land has gone backwards under current policy, proliferating weeds, wilding pine because it was taken out of grazing. I thought Eugenie might have acknowledged this. She talks about regeneration value on river flats.
Stewardship land has values, and that's why the expert panel recognised that with its proposals that a lot of the areas, some 73,000 hectares, it recommended for national park status. Not all of that was stewardship land, but the minister is only recommending 1% for national park status. Stewardship land is regenerating often. We have a biodiversity crisis. We have 4,000 threatened species in Aotearoa. We need to protect their habitats. We need to do the pest control, but protecting their habitats is key.
Are you in any way concerned, Patrick, about? I mean, you've got pretty special places like Denniston Plateau. Apparently it's a bit of a treasure trove of ecological curiosities. You've got 13,000 Kiwis who signed a petition calling for this scientific reserve status, and yet it's open for pillaging.
I think pillaging's overstating it. Look, I grew up on the West Coast. My parents and grandparents moved there to get into mining. I've lived there for most of my adult life. And as I've always said, I don't live there for my sex life. I live there for the great outdoors. It's a fantastic place to be. But there is room for economic development and conservation. And a lot of the time, living on the West Coast, you feel like we're Auckland's conscience, we're Wellington's novelty, we're Canterbury's playground, but there are actually 30-odd thousand people that want to live there and actually have a chance at having meaningful, well-paid work that allows them to stay in the communities where their friends and their family are.
What would you say to that, Eugenie? It's got to be that balance. These are communities of which Patrick Phelps is a core part.
Our tourism industry relies on healthy nature. It was our leading export industry.
And a third of the people in that sector prior to COVID were on working holiday visas, Eugenie.
Well, in terms of the coast is booming at the moment. It does not require an open cast coal mine at Denniston or at Te Kuha. And coal on the West Coast has been boom and bust. We have a climate crisis. And as Wallace said, it is a treasure trove up there with stunted vegetation, stronghold for lizards. The cold, wet climate means kiwi have survived there in really good numbers. We don't have those coal measure habitats protected on conservation
So I'm going to
land.
ask you this, Patrick. Why don't you've seen the extraordinary beauty of Denniston, why don't you and your community pivot to international tourism a lot more than you're doing now?
Again, flooding the area with visitors that you basically make money out of by selling consumer goods and food and other perishables and things like that. It's not experiences. Most of the majority of tourism spending in New Zealand occurs in Auckland, Wellington and Christchurch because that's where the rental car companies are, that's where the high-end shopping is. About $1.60 out of every $100 spent by international tourists in New Zealand gets spent on the West Coast. The rest of it gets spent elsewhere in the country, even though we provide all the pictures that go on the postcards.
Okay, let's go back to an Auckland voice. Let's bring you back in, Claire. I mean, would you...
I can feel his passion.
Well, yeah,
I'm sort of feeling it.
I can feel, you can feel the
I
heat.
walk around the most urbanised environment in the country and then get told that I'm not the conservationist for some reason. I find it to be a great irony.
Yeah. All right, Claire.
I
Claire,
think us mining is hardly conservation, Patrick.
The escarpment access arrangement that Bathurst Resources obtained from the Minister of Conservation has funded about 20 or 30,000 hectares of pest control in Kahurangi National Park.
And then they closed the mine when coal prices dropped.
Yeah, and
So
carried on
going back to
funding the
Claire,
conservation work, and you can go and look on the Department of Conservation's website. There are a lot of bird species that are increasing in number because of that pest control, and it otherwise would not be happening.
Huge scar, and if Denniston goes ahead, it would utterly destroy really significant habitats.
Claire, do you want the open cast mine to go ahead or not?
I want to say no, but I'm a little bit scared of Patrick's passion.
When's the last time you went to the coast?
I haven't. See, I haven't. And,
Okay.
But I'm not sure that precludes me
No.
from having
No,
an
it
opinion.
doesn't.
No,
I mean,
no, of course it doesn't.
I don't think if you've never been to Northland, you shouldn't have an opinion on how Cody Forest should be protected, but there's got to be a balance.
Okay, well, you're the guest here. Eugenie, final word.
We've lost an opportunity here. There are a few good additions, but the disposal and the government's proposals to change conservation legislation is a very real threat to our public conservation lands that everybody should be concerned about. Kia ora. Thanks for having me.
Good on you. Eugenie Sage there. Very nice to have you there. That's former Conservation Minister and former Green MP Eugenie Sage. Interesting.
Yeah, no, I mean, it's a worthwhile discussion, but I think it's one that will basically... I think a function is that as people have urbanised and mechanised over the last few hundred years, fewer people have been required for things like mining, farming, forestry and things like that. There hasn't been a broad understanding of those sectors in a more urbanised population, and they've made up a smaller and smaller voting base.
So this person here says coal mining is so 18th century on the text.
All around the world, humans collectively consume 8 billion tonnes of coal, more than we've ever consumed. Now, that is not necessarily a pleasant reality, but the trends are not going down.
Right. What are your thoughts on that? Let us know. 2101. We have Clare Amos, Patrick Phelps there.